Hey friends, welcome to our Midweek Moment. I'm Pastor Nicole. This week we started our new sermon series, Unimportant, How Jesus Loved the Outcasts. We are going to be spending the next 6 weeks in the book of Luke, looking at the outcasts that Jesus ministers to. It's kind of the core of Luke's gospel, that Jesus spends so much time and energy ministering to people who would be considered outcasts in his society. So we started at the very beginning of the book and we took a look at some outcasts who were labeled as too old or too young. Particularly, we talked about Zechariah and Elizabeth and how they were too old to have a baby, but were given a miraculous pregnancy anyway. We also talked about how Mary was awfully young to become a mother to the Messiah, or really a mother to anybody, and how God doesn't use age as a qualifier for us. And I think sometimes in our lives, we really focus on that. We think we're too young to do something. We think we're too old to do something. And I think sometimes we just really don't think there's ever a right age. You know, I've spent a lot of time in ministry as the young person. I was one of the youngest in my seminary class. I was the youngest ordained elder in our conference for a couple of years, several years, until somebody ousted me out. And for a while, I was in that young clergy group, and you're just kind of in that kind of mode of being young. And I would have pastors call me whippersnappers, and I would, a youngin' and all of that, and it kind of becomes a part of your identity. Like, you start to take on that identity of oh, I'm young and I'm inexperienced and I'm green. And while those things are true, that's not how God wants us to see ourselves, right? Now that I'm a little more mature in my ministry, I kind of wonder well, now I'm kind of getting up there. Am I too old to bring creative change and kind of the next steps? Have I been stepped over? Because it doesn't feel like there's a right age. What's the right age to bring effective change and to help our denomination continue to move forward in a healthy way? It's kind of weird. It's just weird. And I realize in preaching this sermon this week that nobody is telling me I'm too young, and nobody's telling me I'm too old, and nobody's telling me that I'm just the right age. That's not happening. But I'm telling myself those things, right? That I'm too old or I'm too young. And instead of listening to what I'm saying to myself or what culture is telling me, or even what my denomination and my peers are telling me, really what I should be focused on is what God is telling me. And God is calling me to lead. God is calling me to pastor. God is calling me to serve. And I want you to know that the same is true for you. You are not too young. You are not too old. You are just right. Whatever age you are just the right age to serve God in the ways that God is calling you. And so instead of kind of focusing on, well, I got to wait until I'm older, or I missed my shot and I'm too old now, focus on how God is calling you now. Calls change over time. The ways God asks us to serve change over time. But God is always calling us. God is always asking us to love others, to seek out others, especially the outcasts. And so sometimes while we might kind of frame ourselves as the outcast by putting ourselves into a box, that is not how God works. And that is not how God wants us to think of ourselves. God doesn't want us to think of ourselves as being not old enough or too old or whatever. God wants us to know that we are wholly loved and beloved wherever we are in our life's journey. It doesn't matter how old we are. It doesn't matter how young we are. God calls us to serve. And so I just want that to be an encouragement to you today. If you feel like you are in one of those boxes, or you just don't really know, you just don't feel empowered to lead in whatever you are, whatever your life's situation is, God is calling you. God is calling you to lead. God is calling you to serve. And so I would encourage you to say, yes, Lord, I will do it. When we look at the story of Elizabeth and Mary and how God called them to serve through these miraculous pregnancies, I just hope that we can answer that call with the same sort of faithfulness and joy, and to know that God can and will use us if we have a willing heart. So all that to say, spend some time this week kind of assessing yourself. Are you putting yourself into a box? Are you allowing somebody else to put you into a box? Don't do that. Only allow God to define you. And if God's going to define you, I promise you, he is going to define you as loved and worthy. So I hope you have a great rest of your week. You won't want to miss this next weekend. We are going to be talking about some more outsiders in the Gospel of Luke, particularly women. Luke talks about women more than any other gospel, and he has a lot of really great things to say about them. So we hope you will join us this weekend, and I hope you're having a wonderful Lent. I hope it has been, the kickoff has been a good season of renewal for you, and that it will continue to be a season where you can connect with God. And I hope you have a great rest of your week. We'll see y'all soon. Bye.